Les damos la más cordial bienvenida a este webinar ICUSTA, en esta oportunidad sobre salud mental de estudiantes.
In this opportunity on mental health of students organized by ICUSTA International Council of University of St. Thomas Aquinas, and with the participation of the University of Santo Tomás of Chile, University of Abat of Barcelona, Spain, Catholic University of Ávila, Spain, University of São Paulo of Madrid, Spain, University of the Santo Tomás de Aquino of Argentina, University Santo Thomas of the United States in Houston, and the Santo Thomas University of Philippines. I want to thank especially to the academics of the universities before mentioned, who will participate today, and the authorities of such universities for the support to this ICUSTA webinar and their interest to share their knowledge with the other members of the area. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Roberto Lafontaine, Executive Director of ICUSTA, and I'll be the moderator of this seminar. Following, I'll introduce our attendees to this seminar. Mr. Antonio Camacho, Professor of the Faculty of Science of the Católica University of Ávila, Research Postdoctorate of the Malaga University, License in Psychology by the Granada University, Doctor in Psychology by the Malaga University, Expert University of Neuroscience and Clinical Psychology. María Dolores Barroso of University of Oliva, Professor in Psychology in the University of Oliva, Doctor in Humanities and Social Sciences in 2017. After 4 years research pre-doctorate in that university. Since 2012, she is sanitary psychologist of the private area, together with the teaching activity and research. Macarena Lucar of the University of Santo Tomás of Chile, Faculty of the Communications Psychology of Pontificia University Católica of Chile, Therapeutic, Couple Therapeutic, and Family Therapeutic, specialized in narrative therapy of Mental Research Institute of Palo Alto. She has 18 years of experience in teaching and pre- and postgraduate in academic management. And Elisa López from the University of St. Thomas in Houston. She is Master in Education, a member of the faculty in the Department of Psychology, and Residence Director for Conference for St. Thomas University. Is expert in psychology and counseling, and has worked in student affairs for almost 10 years. She performs in the St. Thomas University that looks for working with universities that consider themselves of higher risk. She works with first-year students through the symposium students of the first-year University of St. Thomas in Houston. Marcelo Luis Allen from the University of the North of Santo Tomás de Aquino, licensed in psychology, teacher in the license career and the psychology license as well in the University of Norte University of Santo Tomás de Aquino, professor and a postgraduate, a member of the Argentinian Psychology Association, a member of the Directive Commission of the Psychodiagnosis Studies. Dr. Amable Cima Muñoz of San Pablo University of Madrid, Spain, doctor in psychology by University of Oviedo, psychologist specialized in clinical psychology, orientation of cognitive orientation, master in psychopharmacology by the Principality of Asturias. He's the international affiliate of the American Psychology Association, by the Faculty of Medicine by the University of São Paulo, and she's the research in neuropsychology, intelligence, and human talent. He's master director of general psychology and sanitary of the San Paulo State University, and psychology chief in the in Monte Principe clinic head. We have high-level panelists, and we are very happy that you have agreed to participate with us. Before starting with the presentations, because some of the speakers will have to leave before finishing, I would allow all participants that you can, among yourselves, after listening to the presentation, invite your colleagues whose presentation you have interest the most to participate in classes that you have online. I think it is a great opportunity to generate a talk between students and some classes with more fluency to generate shared knowledge between the authorities and the members of the professors of those universities of ICUSTA. I would send you this presentation to everybody. You will have the presentation, but it is important that we can generate the knowledge. Now we invite Professor Dr. José Antonio Camacho of the Ávila University so that he can start his presentation.
José Antonio, estás sin micrófono.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon from Spain, and good morning in other parts of the world where you are listening to me for this speak about mental health and for Spanish studies for COVID-19. As you know, Spain has been one of the countries that has suffered more the pandemic. And initially in Europe, and together with Italy, we've been the most affected in the first months of this pandemic. And it is very important to consider the psychological components that this affects in a pandemic. So it is very important for the formation of the future graduates of psychology and for the professionals that will work in human health, that will have a wider knowledge and how these external elements affect us related with the health and empirical, and we have to prepare ourselves to face this in the future decades for possible new pandemics that may have answers here, the required answer from us, and that we consider as resilience. We'll have four important. I will see that if I can show you the presentation. Okay, there are four aspects of the pandemic and its influence in human health. Some of the psychological information about the pandemic in teenagers in Spain. Some of the research that are made about psychology on pandemic and resources of how to face it. The pandemics are epidemics on a wide scale that is affecting millions of people in various countries in the world, and sometimes it extends throughout the world. There are behavior patterns that are sometimes very worrisome that can surge from a generalized infection. The psychological impact was very, very large, more than the clinical impact. Some people may become very anxious. They may experiment anguish and very dangerous level to maybe they require some special treatment for their emotional crisis. This can be generated by different factors, by, for example, different factors for like anxiety and stress, post-traumatic stress as well. The TEP It can generate by stress factors related with the pandemic, as as being present by a more generalized mortality, and also by death of beloved ones, as we are some of us facing that. Those people can experiment disease behavior. The symptoms include nausea, fatigue, sleep problems, and maybe problems, thinking problems, memory problems, and those problems, neurological problems, are receiving great attention. And the months that have been after this contact. So now there's a series of investigations that has come out of what is going to be for this influences on the body. So there has been a behavior in the pandemic, but it can sometimes be difficult to determine what are really the emotional reactions. We can indicate the irritability, the depression, that it has an immune response for this, but we don't know the stressful factors, psychological factors. It is because of those physical difficulties, also because of the lack of food, too many people in the hospitals of the beloved ones also. One of the most important studies on general of the population has focused mostly this year on the risk factors, psychosocial factors. We have various references of author that has worked through this hard year of pandemic. You said, well, there are diverse investigations that are coming from because of this cause. But in some authors have hypothesized the possibility that we can start mechanisms to face this situation,
So,
pandemic
in terms
situation.
of resilience, we stress the urgent need in terms of mental health to change that focus that we normally have over the psychopathology and moving towards to that resilience capacity and recovery. Moreover, research articles that explore this capacity to cope with adverse and situations that emerged due to the COVID-19 pandemic are still limited in terms of Spanish population. This confinement can have a negative impact in the physical and mental health of adults and elderly people. Studies suggest that kids without school are associated have a poor sleeping pattern and bad eating habits. In a confinement situation, these bad habits are more based on other bad habits, just like as the lack of contact with the outside world and a higher use of digital devices that interfere in the quality of sleep, bad management of stress that has an impact on eating habits. The closure of schools and universities brought a higher uncertainty levels. Those students who were studying for the final tests and university students have seen in danger their evaluations and are worried about their academic and professional future due to the constant changes in dates and modalities in tests. Also, for children with ASD, autism spectrum disorders, the inability to go outside can foster or boost irritability. This is why in Spain, during the strict confinement phase, was allowed for these children with ASD go out always under the responsibility of an adult. Economic crises are associated with an increase of mental health issues in young people. The confinement are another risk factor for these mental health disorders associated with a low income level that have a direct impact when they limit the development of their lives. There are developed in homes which normally are small houses. Also, the coronavirus pandemic has widened the gap, the digital gap. So those families without the economic means or poor technological knowledge, just difficult the access of this digital information. Also, the poor usage or lack knowledge of these new technologies, the lack of going to school is a risk factor, as well as lesser parental control in terms of digital devices usage. This also is associated with changes in sleeping patterns derived from the usage of blue screen usage at nighttime. Also, some research regarding psychological issues have data in terms of more specifically in Cordoba city in Spain. According to the World Health Organization, suicide is the second cause of death among teenagers, and they recommend that we pay attention to the adolescents or observing any changes in behaviors, aggressiveness, and social isolation. Also on their own future, because in some way these can be signs that we need to pay attention, and we have to teach them to express these problems and try to find an empathic answer. In Spain, the latest data from the INE show that in 2018, 268 adolescents committed suicide, and young people between 50 and 29 years. So this is a study called Self-Inflicted Injuries in Adolescents and Young Adults by Sanchez, Robles, and Camacho. They remember to demand urgent action. So suicide prevention protocols must be adapted to the characteristic of each risk group, and specialized actions have to be taken in order to prevent public health authorities regarding this possible increasing mortality rates among young people, and that we have seen in recent decades. And we have to improve in this regard in our country and also in the rest of the world, because this protocol improvement can save lives. On a recent study published in Bangladesh, reveals that particularly adolescents during the pandemic have a predisposition to commit suicide, and in some way they have seen that those adolescents studied between 18 and 28 years, they have a 12.8 prevalence in committing suicide. The factors are being male and living in low income areas, study and exercise regularly. As a coping mechanism, we would have to mention the development of the resilience capacity. It is fundamental to have a positive communication over the aspects that brings this pandemic in terms of family, friendships, and also reducing, in some situations when confinement is not strict, the possibility of just a mere digital communication, although this can be helpful because we need that physical and direct contact. It is important to educate healthy habits. In this sense, it is possible to prevent an increase in a poor or a sedentary lifestyle. Also, remote counseling in some places is not possible because you cannot have a physical interaction. Also, groups and fathers, parents and adolescents need to build supporting networks in helping adolescents to overcome these issues through positive models that we have thought in this pandemic, and also the strengthening of links and relationships so parents can take advantage of this confinement, of this time that they have available with their children in order to expose themselves in a positive way and develop the psychological development of the kids in their custody as it is their children, so they can spare a greater amount of time with their children playing and talking and developing other activities that without that availability of time wouldn't be possible. And finally, coping mechanism, as it was shown in a recent study conducted in Spain, have to do with a higher academic level and also with optimism. It also has to do with a series of predictable variables that in order to develop more.
Muchísimas gracias, José Antonio, por tu muy interesante exposición. Quiero además aprovechar para decirle a los asistentes que pueden, abajo donde está preguntas y respuestas, escribir sus preguntas y serán respondidas en ese mismo canal por los panelistas. Estamos en este minuto con algún problema con la interpretación al inglés, pero estamos chequeando cuál es el problema para que podamos solucionarlo.
And we were having some problems with interpreting into English. We are now checking what is going on in order to have it solved as soon as possible. I'm sorry about that.
Questions in Q&A at the back of the screen, and the panelists, the speakers, will respond, answer there.
En la parte de preguntas y respuestas.
María Dolores Barroso López, de la Universidad Abat
Barroso López from Abat Oliva University. Welcome, María Dolores. Good afternoon and good morning. Well, let's see the presentation.
Bien, es mi deseo.
So now let's go to the first slide. I would like to do an introduction from the clinic experience. In terms of St. Thomas Aquinas in the current years have the knowledge and share the knowledge in the theory and practice of psychology. In this sense, I have seen as an interesting topic to develop in the seminar how it is this vision from the whole potential of the human being and the possibilities of growth can help to reflect upon how to live this particular situation and current situation as an opportunity, as an important opportunity for personal growth. This is an aspect that I will then develop. So we have to understand that the complete health for humans is not understood without understanding the whole human dimensions and the complete development and virtue. This context take us to understand in the first place that mental health not only could be understood as a lack of mental disorders, even the absence of negative emotions, but as a vital growth from the idea that human beings has an idea or a desire to reach an ideal that precisely is not able to organize their emotions to a certain personality. So next slide, from this point of view that human beings are a unity, we're able to understand these dynamics in the face of the daily lives. We understand this unity. So thanks to, in some way, emotions show us all the dynamisms that acquire in our everyday lives. And through the examples and the words that I use right now, and we share and use the words to share this inner world, and the words is we manifest, and through emotions we express that vitality. We can do good with happiness because we are able to love, and we can reject the evil because thanks to that firmness, we can resist difficulties and go through and judge whatever it's good. We can suffer with patience and resilience because thanks to the development of that strength, mainly on the basis of love, we are able to transform pain and suffering in true acts of love. And I will dare to say, with all the discovery of the updates that I can include here, is that from this vision, emotions are vital forces that can be regulated, channeled, and brought to our inner world, and is a manifestation of a vital project for a higher happiness. And so each and one of us has a relevant and important personality, but that's a force that we can drive thanks to the criteria that we considered for our inner world. So no, let's go to the next slide. I highlight the importance to remember the discovery of our own potential, and in the emotional context, take us to consider all those emotions, and those inner emotions make a reference to the idea of what we want to be. This is why when we discover a good reality, we are completely touched for that good, and we also are driven to share that. When we talk about emotions, we talk about everything that we fear, that we love, etc. And it also has a myriad of details with infinite connotations. We don't stop there. We also talk about forces and tendencies as the desire of proper excellence and professional achievement, virtue and knowing reality, study, patience, love and beauty, etc., that can be organized. That desire many times
It
is
is
hidden.
hidden in different kinds of vulnerability and difficulties. In this way, how can we make these forces to work? Starting from a profound and sincere knowledge of ourselves, like with our own vulnerabilities, to consider that how am I going to orient my life, and also in the social and spiritual wave, and organize my love scales. How do I, for example, give myself to the others to love and hate things, for example, what is worth to be loved, the respectful of parents, the renounce, and hate those that it is worth to reject, the envy, the loss of time, etc. Investigations have showed us the consequences that what are the consequences of the lack of self-control. And it is important to self-value out of ourselves and to persevere with the goals and the concentration in studies and other multiple aspects. We'll go through the next slides to evaluate. I have had different correlations that have had throughout the years through different investigations that show this what we're saying right now. We are people that have auto-regulation capacity that can keep ourselves in persevering in our goals, in a vital goal on our conscience, what is worth to strive for, and the tranquility that allows us a good concentration and use of our reason that we can feel ourselves that we're more capable of. In this sense, and go into to another issue and to the next slide, I would like to have having this general bird's eye view to talk a little bit about reflection and what experience the students have and how this relates with the shock that they have under this situation. What we see right now that there are many changes in responsibility. There are changes that in the beginning that it is very serious effects of what we want and what we are how do we want to orient ourselves, our lives? The youth, it is very important to settle that identity in which it is integrated two important questions. Who am I and where am I going? Because we situate what we want. If it is, they are not realistic, they can difficult our growing and generate more disorientation and anguish, and to experiment a great lack of sense. In some way, the stress that we have are the ideals and the habits that we have, or in other words, the affirmation of ourselves, the love with ourselves, and the response of the love that we want to manifest through this vital process. So all this with living, having relation with important people of our lives. Other authors have confirmed that lack of maturity and responsibility can go to a higher, to a vulnerability, like different symptoms are like distortions of self-knowledge. An important study throughout the years, the young people look themselves as consumists and independent people, and all these studies, they keep these characteristics, but the other years of studies, this has been modified. So in 2005, um, there's an important quality that is more related with the consumption, focus in the nowadays, and less capacity of tolerating suffering and sacrifice. The weakness of will is related with one of the main reasons that can take the students to failure in studies, failures in work, and egocentrism also confusing own image with other people's, and how do we see other people's, with how, for example, what we see on the social medias, etc., etc. So going to the next slide, a little bit more to center in with all this aspect of taking decisions, of changing responsibilities, and what brings all this is they come to the influence the students, the situations in which we have also different tensions, uncertainties, stress, and of course, disorientation. In this sense, together with other emotions, in this uncertainty, lack of control, insecurity, like sadness, frustration, can also come other tendencies that each one have with more intensity that before we control them, but because of the uncertain situation right now, because of the vulnerability, we can suffer with more intensity. With this, goes comes also with irritability, obsessions, dependency, convulsions, and all kinds of symptoms related with depression. In this sense, we can go to the last slide. As a teacher and as a psychologist, clinical psychologist, what I see is that we face with many young people uh, with a lack of hope, and we have lack of confidence for the influence in others as well. They are impacted by the situation and how we push them, and they are felt that they are pushed even more when we have expectations on how the things are going to be, how to study, who to relate with. We start to nourish, and then we find that everything starts to change. We start to nourish a frustration that generates a great sensation of capacity and hopelessness. So what we hoped to do, we can't do. So comes, for example, feelings that we can't do things, that we cannot manage time, that problems cannot be solved. It can obviously generate diverse emotions, mostly centered in sadness, despair, and fear that nourished by different factors, etc. These emotions, we know that are not good, or maybe they're not bad, but if it expands in the situation, it makes it continuously. to loss of patience, lack of stability, and it generates an egocentric that we are focusing attention on ourselves and our suffering and our auto and how people hurt us and how we are not considered, how people do not help us. So that is what we see on therapists usually. It is feared also that we lose the present and we focus on the past and what we have not gotten before with a lack of capacity to face the future. That is why, in some way, that I think it is very important together with this resilience terms and etc. We let's remember that the present and live the present in a significant way as an opportunity, vital opportunity. It's our richness and an opportunity. There's always something that we can do, that we can diminish the sadness and face what we fear with more patience and being conscious of also that vulnerability, but being also strong. It is also an opportunity to start to look, what do I want? How do I manage my life? Before, maybe because of the changes of all the activities that maybe they wouldn't realize about it. Okay, I'm about to finish. And to live this circumstance. So that's why we have to nourish the happiness and hope, two emotions that have mutual feedback. The happiness in the sense that we can make things work and it can manifest in how do we respond to our friends, to our partners. If it is we are able to listen to others, with, for example, to help maybe simple home help others, and we can profit by our studies. How can we profit by the time, and maybe talk to someone that haven't talked before, etc., etc. Deeply, what I mean is that it is an opportunity to research and validate our capacity together with our vulnerability, and also feel that we're capable of helping each other, because those who are who can really grow and show their possibility, it is capable of valoring what you have of good and how you can share it, how you can live in present time as if it was the last minute, making small actions that can allow you to change your life and those who surround you. So with the satisfaction that you hope that you can overcome that, this attitude of communicating, because you trust that you have something good to give, something good that you can communicate. That's why growing, it's a given journey. How can how can I serve the best under what circumstances? And these questions are really important. So this is the way I finish my presentation, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria Dolores. Very interesting, and undoubtedly, there's very much that we have to learn about the pandemic and the conduct that has been developed this time. Now, the kind of Macarena Lucar from the University of Santo Tomás of Chile, professor of Faculty of Social Studies and Communications. Welcome, Macarena. Thank you very much. Thank you, Roberto. Oh, I see that I'm sharing the presentation with you.
Es un placer para mí estar a cargo de
It's a
presentar.
pleasure for me to present the experience of the Santo Tomás University of Chile in terms of the approach, the needs of our students' mental health in these times of uncertainty times. To start, it is very important to share with you also some of the features of our institutions and the students that are going to be the focus of this proposal that are going to share with you. It is important to say that the university, the institutions of Santo Tomás is all along Chile, from Arica to Punta Arenas. There are 22 the the branches that we are in, and we can develop formation spaces to 80,000 students. If we think about that, we can look that it's about 64% of the students, of women students of our institutions, 25% of them, they study and work, and about 30% they take care of others, maybe some person with age, kid, and over 27% they study in different programs that we have in day programs. And we think in society, in the moment when they enter the society, a little more about 50% they come from, they are between 18 and 20 years, 30% when they start to study with us, they have more than 25 years old. They 74% of the first generation of that has higher education in their families. This is very important characteristics because it contrasts also with what literature tells us when we see the experiences of investigations and regarding higher education. Clearly, this education shows us the range in that the people that has higher university have mental problems that are considered important, and particularly when it is related with agitation, depression, and above norm average population. An important indication is many people that have suicides tendency in male population. For this program, it is important to talk about the context that has been developed. And together with this,
We have also shared the problems of the pandemic with everyone this year, but we also have to add the experience in terms of social experience, the outburst that happened in Chile, an important social movement started in October 2019, where the young population has had a main role creating a series of effects and experiences from this topic, many of them feeling protagonists with the hope of making social changes that in fact uh, have had an impact in our institutions and themselves living and their families experiences of anxiety and anguish related to these uncertainties created by social movements in this magnitude that we have seen in our country. In terms of the pandemic experience and confinement that has come with it, it has an impact in the ways that we can carry out every single experience. And this includes the formation or training process, education process. So as we are doing right now, we're working through digital platforms that also have with it a series of challenges in terms of connectivity, disposition of the required devices, and also environmental uh, uh, characteristics that have created throughout time increasing mental health problems in our student population. They are, at some point, the students have brought these needs, for example, related to the social outbursts that we mentioned at the end of 2019 through letters and petitions, some of them in movements bringing demands that include the mental health needs. Also, professors, teachers, and teams have brought to our institution the need and the increase of the concerns about the psychological distress in our students. Psychologists that depend of the Directorate of Student Affairs in our institution also talk about this necessity. I am going to mention now how we have reacted and how we have managed this. Initially, we count on the Directorate of Student Affairs that is in charge of attending or serving students in terms of their needs. We have a group of psychologists and social workers in every single branch of the country that respond to the necessities, specific situations at times that our students present. On the other hand, we also have activities in terms of physical activities, physical education and workshops. And this year have been done through digital platforms and also motivational talks where we bring relevant actors for our students in terms of impacting their motivation, having an impact in their well-being, also the development of institutional values. But what's new in this program in terms of our well-being and mental health program? So we have brought new actors to the activities that were developed from the Directorate of Student Affairs. So we have included the capsule design, active pauses, developed from the side of the health department in the university that bring these videos and these capsules that allows us to make a pause in certain moments in considering the long hours of the screen usage. We also have the learning centers that receive the students with certain difficulties in their courses in terms of the learning process. Also, we have the tutorials in individual and collective way for some assignments. We have also coaching or mentoring sessions with higher or senior students that are in charge of the needs of the students. What I'm going to focus right now in what we have developed from the communication and social science faculties, particularly from the mental health team that have created a series of devices to also put at the disposition of our institution and to what we already have. It is a series of actions that have looked in a broader way through talks or virtual talks or webinars where we can have more than 200 participants in order to find more intermediate situations than similar to a workshop that respond to the mental health requirements for our students and have a capacity of 60 participants. And also we have had a 3-session workshop to integrate more specific feedback in the usage of certain tools with capacity of 25 participants. Also, we have an online course implemented in terms of mindfulness that we have established since September this year in 8 parallel sessions. We have also created a training process in terms of specific topics regarding mental health situations that are more prevalent at this stage in order to reinforce the knowledge of the psychologist team that are related to our Directorate of Student Affairs. So since June to the month of September, we have been able to develop 7 massive talks, 13 workshops in a unique session, 5 workshops for free sessions, and 12 training modules for our psychologists. So more specifically, more than 1,000 students have participated in our workshops and talks, and around 80% of psychologists were able to participate in these training modules. We are now in the phase of analyzing an assessment of the participants' perceptions in these activities. More specifically, we developed some questions of characterization and 21 perception questions of their experience in order to assess these activities. So out of the total of the participants of these experiences, we were able to obtain 125 student responses, and mainly those who responded were part of a population of diurnal time. Most of them are women. More than 50% are students that belong to our university, and the rest are students of CFT and IP. So what our students are telling us when we ask them about this experience? In general, they feel satisfied with their participation. Their expectations were met. They responded from mildly satisfied to highly satisfied. In regards with the activities and the tools delivered through these formats, in general, we can see that over 70% consider very useful or highly useful the tools that we have delivered. In terms of the impacts and the level of impacts of the participation of these workshops associated to their daily lives, we see that 70% they recognize a positive change from the participation of these workshops, and more than 60% say that it has an impact on their personal lives. So specifically, when we give a voice to our students in terms of these devices, we find a positive assessment in regards of these workshops, and they value especially the activities that were provided, the tools and the topics chosen, and the idea of using and applying these tools in their daily lives. We have also found we have also assessed the psychologist teams, and also I want to say what they value, the fact that we have positioned the topics of mental health in our institution, having the possibility to talk about this with our students, and we have made possible to have a preventive approach through the devices developed. An important point is that they prefer smaller student groups in order to handle their mental health issues or topics. And finally, what we have to do from now on. In this uncertainty context, we also realize that their needs are changing, and we have to anticipate to this. Currently, we are preparing a new phase of this program where we expect to reinforce our diagnostic tools, and we want to keep on studying the necessity of reaching a balance regarding the access of the population and what we need to have access to. And precisely, we would like to respond to the needs of our students. It is important for us keep a focus on the prevention and improvement of their mental health, and also the articulation of units and actors inside our own institution in order to create these responses. Of course, the learning process is derived from the usage of the digital devices. It is important to respond to the needs of their students. And lastly, I would like to share a message regarding the concept of crisis with this double dimension of danger and opportunity, because we are currently trying to provide an answer in this context of crisis, given this accumulation of tension that we have seen in our country, and that it has certainly affected our student population. When we look into the future regarding to reinforce this program that we are able to share with all of you right now. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Macarena, por
Thank you very
mostrarnos
much, Macarena, for sharing with us such an interesting experience with so useful. I would like to explain for the rest of the institutions that maybe it is not clear. Macarena talked about the IP and CFG. IP is the Professional Institute. Those are technical institutions, and the technical training center. In total, the St. Thomas institutions are 3: the St. Thomas University, the Professional Institute, and the Technical Training Center of St. Thomas. And it has 22 centers in 19 cities. So for the work of Macarena's team has not been easy working with such amount of students and different in different parts of the country. So thank you very much, Macarena. I would like to leave you with Professor Analicia López from St. Thomas University in Houston, Texas. Welcome, Analicia. She is going to speak in English, so I invite you to use the simultaneous translation feature.
With us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Por invitarme. Estoy muy emocionada de hablar con ustedes hoy. Entonces, mi presentación se llama A prueba de niños, cómo el COVID-19 ha cambiado la experiencia típica de la universidad. Como vas a ver en un minuto, porque esta es la idioma que uno de mis estudiantes utilizan para la transición en la universidad en los tiempos de pandemia, en vez de ella tuvo una experiencia que ella se siente que ella es la prueba de niños. Entonces me parece que es muy poderoso. Entonces voy a utilizar esas palabras para esta presentación de hoy. Entonces, para darles una visión de la Universidad de San Tomás, estamos en Houston, Texas, en los Estados Unidos. Somos una universidad privada pequeña. Estamos localizados en el corazón de Houston, que es la cuarta mayor universidad en Estados Unidos. Somos 1,800 graduados. Tenemos 450 residentes estudiantes. Y nosotros tenemos distanciamiento social. Tenemos ahorita 200 estudiantes residentes actualmente. Entonces ha impactado bastante el COVID. Tenemos Texas, 1,000,000 de casos. En Texas, 1 de 6 tejanos contrajeron el COVID. Entonces, el condado que nosotros estábamos, entonces hemos estado muy bien, hemos estado menos de 5%. Por esto, San Tomás comenzó con clases online, comenzando con una opción de clases en línea. Entonces tenemos una comunidad residencial muy buena, pero este año es mucho menos. Tenemos espacios muy amplios, los estudiantes no están permitidos de tener invitados. Entonces, estos son aspectos de nuestra comunidad, de cómo ha impactado a nuestra comunidad, de cómo ha impactado a nuestros estudiantes. Entonces, hay muchos impactos de COVID-19 y yo les resumo algunos de los que hablaré durante mi presentación hoy. Entonces, algunos de los estudiantes tienen falta de conexión en el campus, transiciones incompletas en la preparatoria. Entonces, en vez de tener la transición completa, algunos estudiantes sienten que no tienen una transición completa. Entonces, falta de esa transición. Entonces, problemas de ajuste, problemas de percepción y de concentración, ansiedad de nuestros estudiantes, sobre finanzas, todos los aspectos, pero estos son los aspectos también que los estudiantes han sentido impacto. Los estudiantes se han sentido desconectados, pérdida de familia también, y falta de experiencias. Y esto ha tenido una gran influencia en los factores socioeconómicos. Entonces, de los que yo voy a mencionar en particular son factores emocionales, académicos, sociales y psicológicos. Entonces, primero, para ver el factor emocional, una de las cosas que hemos trabajado mucho en la Universidad de San Tomás es escuchar a nuestros estudiantes. Entonces, para cada uno de esos factores, como yo hablaba, voy a hablar también uno de lo que los estudiantes han dicho. Entonces, yo enseño en el departamento de psicología y en este semestre también estoy enseñando teorías de personalidad. Cada semestre enseño diferentes tipos de estudiantes y también enseño a los recién ingresados. Entonces, un curso, entonces en todas las clases he hecho lo mismo para darle a mis estudiantes la oportunidad y el espacio para que puedan procesar, para que puedan hablar cómo la pandemia los ha impactado a un nivel académico, personal también. Y lo hemos hecho de manera de libre escrita. Y entonces les hemos dado oportunidad de que, por ejemplo, díganos cómo fueron las últimas semanas, por ejemplo, o para mis cursos de más altos niveles decimos, ¿cuáles son los impactos emocionales que has tenido por la pandemia o los socioeconómicos, psicológicos? No solamente me ha permitido esto de saber de dónde vienen mis estudiantes, sino cómo los ha impactado. Entonces aquí ustedes pueden ver la primera respuesta que es yo les muestro aquí en la presentación. Ella dijo, yo genuinamente deseo que yo tuviera la experiencia real de la universidad, no esta versión falsificada. Entonces, no quisiera que me dijeran a todo qué tengo que hacer. Una transición importante es que ellos tengan una transición a ser adultos. Los estudiantes, en Estados Unidos es muy normal que los estudiantes cuando entran a la universidad tengan mucha independencia. Entonces, ellos pueden ser muy libres, hacer sus cosas a su modo, pero con el COVID-19, muchos padres, como nosotros sabemos, son mucho más protectores de los estudiantes, no necesariamente están teniendo la oportunidad para vivir en un apartamento o en el campus, ir a la comunidad del campus, sino tener que tener las clases en línea. Entonces, esa experiencia es una descripción de cómo está influyendo a nuestros estudiantes. Otro comentario es, mi padre tiene asma, entonces tenemos que tener cuidado. Y he estado gastando mucho tiempo en casa, en mi cuarto, sintiéndome atrapada. Entonces, hace que todo se mezcla, entonces realmente complica las cosas. Por ejemplo, yo quiero hablar, lógicamente, con más estudiantes de UST, pero yo ahorita simplemente estoy en casa. Otra forma de que los estudiantes han notado que han sentido impacto emocionalmente por la pandemia es relacionado con el sentimiento de tener una mezcla de su tiempo, de universidad, de preparatoria. Ellos están sintiendo que el tiempo a veces está pasando muy rápido o muy lento como resultado del COVID-19. Entonces podemos ver que uno de lo que dijo aquí es, nosotros hemos estado así por 8 meses, si estoy en lo correcto, y lo estamos haciendo la misma cosa por los últimos 8 meses, día y noche. Los grandes cambios fueron mi horario de comenzar el UST, pero y después no ha cambiado absolutamente nada. Entonces ellos están en una transición en donde no tuvieron una transición normal de preparatoria para la universidad y entonces no pudieron realmente tener la oportunidad de tener una transición apropiada. Entonces se está mezclando todo en el tiempo. Entonces podemos ver también aquí, entonces estoy confundido por la universidad. Yo quiero amarlo y todo está pasando, pero este estudiante está sintiendo muchas cosas difíciles. Debería ser un momento de crecimiento, de disfrutar y estar consciente de eso. Pero hay unos estudiantes también donde hay personas que dicen que quieren que lógicamente tener toda la experiencia, pero ha sido muy desafiador y por lo que ya no está pudiendo hacer lo que quiere. Entonces, el otro factor psicosocial es sobre el académico. Entonces, no lo voy a leer todo, esto es una cita bastante grande, pero perdón por los que no pueden leer en inglés, pero voy a leer las partes más importantes de esta situación. Nuestros estudiantes se han impactado mucho por esta pandemia. Para muchos de estos estudiantes han tenido clases en línea para ser preparatoria o universidad. Y este impacto ha causado esta mezcla, esta transición incompleta, pero parte de lo que hemos visto aquí es un sentimiento de casi una falta de realidad. Ellos no sienten que están realmente en la universidad. Y entonces lo que realmente se siente. Entonces ustedes ven aquí en la situación que él dice que ahorita estoy bien, pero no siento que estoy en la universidad. No sé si hace sentido. Entonces el estudiante realmente está hablando sobre la transición, esa transición incompleta, cómo impacta su habilidad de cómo se siente en casa o cómo progresar a la adultez. Entonces, él está sintiendo que todavía está en la preparatoria. Y para la próxima, lo que dijo otro de los estudiantes, de mis estudiantes, él dijo, estas clases en línea me dan una sensación de vacío, una sensación incompleta de aprendizaje. Yo hago las clases, pero realmente estoy aprendiendo. ¿Qué tal si tengo mi grado y no recuerde de nada? Paso mis días muy ansioso para sentir cuándo es que realmente voy a aprender algo. Entonces, muchos de nosotros profesores hemos hecho mucho para que la experiencia de estudiar sea fuerte, robusta, pero en mi universidad hemos visto un cambio muy fuerte en la educación en línea. Entonces, ha sido un gran apoyo para la universidad, pero para muchos de los estudiantes, los estudios en línea no se conectan de la misma manera. Puede ser que los estudiantes aprendan de forma kinestética o tal vez aprenda de diferentes formas, pero cualquiera de las razones es que los estudiantes tienen ansiedad sobre aprender en este ambiente en línea. Pero ¿qué tal si yo no me acuerdo? ¿Qué tal si la educación no es completa? Y entonces parte de eso es que está reflejado en los chistes que, por ejemplo, nosotros vemos en la cultura pop. Ahí había un chiste. Y entonces, está hablando de un chiste. Es una necesidad de aprender, no solamente para los estudiantes, sino para la población en general. Entonces, es algo muy importante que nosotros tenemos que prestar atención. Uno, porque nosotros necesitamos hablar con los estudiantes, nosotros comprometamos de que ellos aprendan de que la sesión de aprendizaje sea completa, que ellos puedan retener eso a lo largo de los años, pero también para ayudar a los estudiantes a tener confianza en su aprendizaje. Entonces, es época para que ellos vayan a sus cursos, para sus aprendizajes, para aplicar los trabajos. Y eso es lo que he aprendido y tengo confianza que sientan eso y que sienten que esta transición de manera correcta. En Estados Unidos puede ser muy difícil para que los chicos tengan trabajo después de graduarse. Puede ser muy competitivo el mercado. Entonces, para los estudiantes es muy importante que los estudiantes tengan confianza en su habilidad, en su aprendizaje y que puedan presentarse con esa confianza. Entonces, ellos puedan ser capaces de ser exitosos. Entonces, yo creo que ese es un factor psicosocial muy importante porque nosotros no queremos que nuestros estudiantes sean impactados para síndrome de postura o una sensación de que no está completa a lo largo de su estudio en la universidad. El otro factor que quiero ver es relacionado con la parte social. Entonces, todos sabemos que este momento de distanciamiento social, entonces nos da una falta de oportunidades sociales. Entonces, impacta a los estudiantes adolescentes que necesitan esa conexión fuerte. Ha sido muy fuerte la influencia de los adolescentes. Entonces, algunas situaciones de estos slides, de estas diapositivas, entonces hay muchas palabras en esta diapositiva, pero nuestros estudiantes tienen tanto para decir sobre el impacto social de la pandemia, de cómo las ha influido. Entonces, el primero es muy corto, pero yo creo que es muy importante. Entonces, en UST yo creo que encuadro bien, pero no he estado en el campus, solamente una vez. Entonces, es un estudiante que es muy estudiante, que es muy optimista, pero estoy muy agradecido con este tipo de estudiantes porque yo creo que lo van a lograr muy bien con esa transición de regreso, cuando esa transición de regreso ocurra. pero este es un estudiante que dice que yo sé que lo lograré, pero no fui al campus, no he tenido esa oportunidad. Entonces el próximo dice, cuando yo estoy veo el hobby, me gustaría ver las personas que estuvieran jugando, para gente hablando. Estaba allí en el hall de residencia, estábamos hablando también con otras personas sobre cómo los estudiantes se sienten. Pero ahorita cuando está todo cerrado, ahorita es difícil salir del cuarto. Entonces es difícil luchar con ese componente social porque va a ser lo más difícil para comprometerse con el mundo, con la universidad. Y esto viene de un estudiante que vive en el campus, sino también lo está viendo como algo muy desafiante por debido a las restricciones. Entonces, este próximo, yo sé que me falta un poquito, corto este tiempo, pero en este estudiante dice que no siento que tengo un campus para donde ir. Yo siento que voy a hacer un proyecto, pero no sé mucho del campus. Entonces, hay una falta de pertenencia. Entonces, es una parte muy importante porque afectan la retención y la persistencia. Pero un modo más amplio es esa transición en la adultez, a encontrar su lugar en la universidad. Entonces, ese sentido de pertenencia es algo que nosotros trabajamos muy duro para que cada estudiante pueda lograrlo dentro de sus primeros años de la universidad. Y ha sido muy desafiante para este año y los estudiantes ha tenido este impacto. Entonces, ha impactado a la habilidad de los estudiantes. Un minuto, ok. Y con eso, entre mi minuto, voy a saltar directamente a mi próximo diapositiva. Desde un punto de vista psicológico, sabemos que los estudiantes han tenido un impacto por la pérdida de familiares. Entonces, ustedes pueden ver lo que dice un estudiante que ha perdido varios familiares y también estudiantes que no han perdido familiares, pero ven que el COVID-19 los ha impactado, donde ellos han llorado debido a su rutina diaria. Entonces, por otro lado, quiero enfocarme en esta parte. Esto viene de una página con Miriam y el título del artículo es y yo creo que esto describe realmente cómo esta pandemia los ha impactado. Entonces, el estudiante dice, no fue terrible al inicio, pero después de un par de días de no tener una rutina, comencé a influenciar mi estabilidad, mi salud mental, porque la cuarentena es como si fuera una espiral de depresión. Sí me siento aislado, no quiero salir de la cama, no como bien y no quiero, estoy en mi cuarto. Entonces, están luchando con esa parte psicológica. Entonces, él ha visto que la pandemia ha sido muy desafiante para él.
Hemos visto varios buenos consejos, pero sabemos que algunos equipos no son buenos. Tenemos que escuchar
The opportunities to process and then provide supports in as many areas as we can, financial, emotional,
de
social.
áreas que podamos en aspectos sociales, emocionales y académicos. Y para finalizar, lo que sea que podemos hacer por nuestros hermanos, lo hacemos como así lo han hecho por mí. Y reforzar ese poder de comunidad. Solamente queremos retener nuestros estudiantes, queremos crear una comunidad, cuidarnos entre todos en un ambiente muy favorable. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Ana Alicia.
Muchas gracias, Ana Alicia. Ha sido muy interesante.
Ha sido muy interesante escuchar una visión también como la tuya de cómo cuidar a los alumnos, cómo escucharlos, cómo conocer sus sentimientos frente a una realidad tan difícil que nos ha tocado a todos vivir. Quiero agradecer.
And also show what the students feel and think, the students in the University of St. Thomas in Houston. Now I want to leave with you to invite Marcelo Luis Sales, professor, the University del Norte Santo Tomás de Aquino of Argentina. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you for welcoming me. And I appreciate this space and sharing with everyone the situation we are experiencing. I'm going to share my screen of my work, and I'm going to try to be brief with the times. Thank you all. I am from the Universidad del Norte of Santo Tomás de Aquino in the province of Tucumán in the Republic of Argentina. In March, when the World Health Organization had already confirmed the existence of a high risk of dissemination of the COVID disease and characterized it as a pandemic, it has caused a crisis in all areas worldwide, and not only affects globally, but also in our country. It has repercussion, and the government decreed in March 2020 what is known as ASPO, which is the preventive and compulsory social isolation. From one day to the next, the entire population is confined to their homes to try to reduce the spread of the virus and thus healthcare. In the first days of ASPO, this resolution of isolation dictated by the government leads to the closure of all commercial activities that were carried out, like shoppings, bars, restaurants, public offices, all were closed. Companies also were closed, the suspension of classes, and there's an interruption of activities like sports and recreational activities like clubs, theaters, cinema, religious activities. And at that time, in the first days, it was not so much the impact, because it was thought that the situation was not going to last so much and that we were going to return in a few days. Due to the lack of information, lack of clear information from our leaders, this expectation was generated, which later was not true. Even before the pandemic, the social situation of the region, and in particular of our province, had been deteriorating due to the growing inequality, the high index of poverty, difficulties in the political and economic areas, and there was a high growth of discontent. Added to the question of the health crisis, the discontent was increasing, and also there were increasing the stress factors. These are some of the images of our shopping center and the university, empty, as they were at the moment. In the educational field, similar measures were taken as in other countries in the region. The educational establishments have been considered as a potential focus for the transmission of the virus, so they were closed, with the suspension of all classes at all levels, primary level, secondary level, university level, and it was influenced by the crisis of COVID. It is needed to maintain the learning process, for which the schools were forced to implement different contact modalities with a diversity of formats, and also in the use of digital platforms. This non-presence way that represents an unprecedented challenge for traditional education in relation to what we were used to in our country from April, and we still continue in this stage. We are in the stage that we call education in times of social isolation, where during these 9 months that we are, the entire school, the entire educational institution moved to the houses, to the homes of both teachers and students. Our province, here we can see the map of Argentina. Here is Tucumán in the north of the country. It is the smallest province of the whole country. And here there are 4 universities, private and state universities. These universities have a large flow of students from other provinces nearby. Of the provinces that constitutes the northern Argentina, and also from other countries. We receive students from other countries like Bolivia and Peru. When the ASPA was decreed, many of the students had the inconvenience of not being able to return to their places of origin, to their homes. This scenario required modifying everything that had been done in the traditional classroom, reinventing, giving new curricular and pedagogical meaning to new forms. Both teachers and students and the whole family, they were forced to have technological resources and connectivity that, although in our country the educational system was unequal in many aspects, the pandemic increases the gap in the access of knowledge and information. Beyond the learning processes that we're trying to promote, there is also the difficulty in socialization and inclusion that appears in many of our students. This change of modality was not easy for teachers and students, nor for the family. We were not used to working with technologies, with digital platforms, with the digital resources that were available, and there is much emphasis where there's a big difference, a very important gap in the access of technology, in the access of connectivity, which does not ensure that the proposed objectives can be complemented. In rethinking these new modalities
brought a dilemma in terms of the educational reality, in terms of where, how, and what to teach and what is learned. Mental health is a well-being state where an individual has the resources to cope the different factors of their daily lives that allow them to work in a proper and convenient way. So mental health reinforces and facilitates the ability to maintain a healthy behavior that keeps people and others safe and healthy. Mental health is part of biopsychosocial, spiritual, and ecological balance of the individual. It has to do with different aspects and dimensions of the individuals, and these needs have to be met, and we have to achieve certain balance to have this well-being. Adversity is a risk factor that threatens those protective factors available to the individual to sustain their well-being and effectively deal with conflict. When a crisis affects the lives of individuals and communities, it is probably to have high levels of stress. That is, the coping mechanisms are insufficient and there is an imbalance and maladjustment, losing the state of well-being. The pandemic that we are going through and the sanitary crisis that we're facing implies a disturbance, a strong impact, which can, in many cases, exceed the ability to function function effectively, both of individuals and social groups who are significantly affected by this impact. Not all problems or psychological problems or this impact can be considered as a disorder or a disease, but most of them can be framed as normal reaction to a normal situation. There is a decrease of these capacities of the individuals to face in a positive or to cope in a convenient and positive way. And this does not imply a psychological disorder. There are many studies developed in our country and also at an international level as the ones that we just we were presented with today, where it synthesizes the fact that we are living this significant psychological anguish that we are facing. And in the vast majority of the population, it is manifested by fear, and in others with anxiety symptoms or depression symptoms, isolation, irritability, also compulsion that we are seeing in studies, or uncertainty, also irritability. We have a low tolerance of anguish.
Provokes this reaction of being mad, difficulty for sleeping, but in other aspects also, other manifestations of this situation in which there's a link has stopped to be harmonic, in which Maria Dolores said before, the control of auto-regulation, the use of the reasoning and the will has been affected as a fundamental element of fundamental variable of mental health. There's an important element that is shown in the surveys, and it is, and we live all that we have experienced that as a teacher. It has to do with the how hours of work that we have, teachers and students also. The time variable has lost the dimension, has lost the organization dimension, in which the quantity of hours that we use to work in teaching, for studying, for those tasks that we require evaluate 2 minutes. So the lack of hours related with the personal aspects, and that also reduces the lack of satisfaction, and also what is known, what Spanish entrepreneurs said, the intoxication, a saturation, overexposure to information. I'm going to summarize these results that come from 2 surveys that are made by our university from the Marches of April and July, in which, in generally speaking, these are some of the results, general results. But to tell the truth, there are much more information. But there's a great lack of satisfaction by the population, in which fundamentally they feel vulnerable. They feel that they don't have the basic rights like liberty, the lack of social events that have not only with meetings but also with the possibility to have the family visits. The beginning was very complex, to go to visit family, friends, sick people, negatively impacting the work. Access to health has been cut off. The lack of we can have the religion, and these are factors that have influenced negatively in all people. Some, to conclude, some of the related with the pandemics, there nobody knows that nobody's really prepared to face this crisis. It has affected in all kinds of fields in our life. It has showed the fragility and the working and the educational system that shows important differences in relation to the socioeconomical areas in the impact of the implementation of the virtual platforms allows us to get close to a social reality and communitary reality of our students, in which many scenarios are displayed, in which we must adapt to each one, facilitating the learning, the encounter, because the lack of connectivity and the access of information it's not the same for everybody. The tools, the resources depend on the characteristics of the reality of each student, and then how, when are the permanent challenges that we have to face permanently in our education and our role as teachers. Nothing was the same when we built the traditional education. Everything was transformed. We have to analyze the present moment of the educational system, also the social aspects that we go through right now. We have to build other everyday life compared to the what we were used to before. With some aspects we've been very comfortable, but the family institutions and all that constitutes our ecosystems, they have a very important role in the health, the mental health of us. But everything is learning, but it also helps to build social links and the formation as a human in all its integrity, just as this is the mission of the spirit. I'm very sorry if I exceeded the time, and thank you very much. Thank you, Marcelo. It has been very interesting to be able to analyze this vision of the lack of equality in communications. I think we have lived in Latin America. Maybe it has been different in the United States or in Spain, but in Latin America, undoubtedly we have lived that, understanding that, for example, provinces or regions, not all have the same connectivity, not all homes have the same connectivity, and with universities like and institutions like ours that have students from the middle class, and then many of those have economical problems. Many of those students have economical problems. So it has been very interesting, your vision, Marcelo Luis, from a subject that has been very complex during pandemic for higher education. Thank you very much. I want to please everybody, if you have questions, they are and I want to now introduce Professor Dr. Amable Cima Muñoz from the University San Pablo of Madrid, Spain. Thank you very much, Dr. Amable, for being with us today. Good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen.
Creo que podemos más o menos.
I think we can see right now. Okay, very good. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar, and it is very interesting, and basically because in occasions it has had the role, the student role of young people in all this health matter. So it has affected very much fundamentally in some aspects like the health, not only the body, but mental health as well. So my intention today is to make a brief reflection of some actions in which they can be educated to be laid out with youngsters, teenagers, or young adults, or university, the students of universities, with the idea of what's going to happen after, during the start of the pandemic in March to June, with the hardest confinements in Europe. Let's say there was a layout, more passive layout, stay at home, and to go out on the streets is very difficult. And there are people that have to go to work, and they go to work with fear. But what's going to happen the day that we can go back to streets, and or that we can have partially our normal life? So we have to talk about these ideas. What kind of things do we have to talk about? I think that basically from the criteria like from the World Health Organization, in the sense that in what way can we understand the mental health in people, in young people, in young adults, like 25 years approximately. So there's a very important percentage of the population of young teenagers with mental problems. So there's 15% evidently with. It varies, of course, of the countries and depends on the social, in the economic development. Many of mental disturbance I can show at very early ages, after 14 years old, and most of the cases you don't even detect, and it's not even treated, which when they become teenagers and adults, they have an emotional burden that has been taken from years before. The depression is the depression generates an important problem from our way of having everyday life. So the capacity of the boy to adapt to normal life, the suicide, a very important cause of death that shouldn't be that way. But according to the World Health Organization, the suicide is the third cause of death in the world, in the global speaking. For example, in Spain, the suicide in people less than 30 years old, it is almost the first cause of death, of non-natural death. So if we don't treat the mental problems in young people, that is going to have very, very serious consequences in adults. The COVID-19 has showed us all those issues that in many cases that we were clear before, but for us it was something very theoric. We thought it was theoric, something maybe in an apocalyptic situation, but it was the first stage of the COVID. But it's happening right now in the second stage of COVID, and maybe the third stage of COVID. We have tools for it. We have to give tools for these teenagers and for those adults fundamentally, because they can have resilience, psychological resilience, all that surrounds the problem of the pandemic. So we have to take into account that one of the important issues that I've seen here in Spain with youngsters is how they have faced after all the hardest part was gone, and well, then they had more flexibility, and they began to get together. But there's a very elemental issue that young people don't think about death. Young people think about that they are immortals, but it is not true. They are not immortals. So in many situations, the human health, it is not taken account, thinking that, well, they have the physical health that makes us feel good, but we discover that it is not that way, because there's a very important percentage of young people with many difficulties that the pandemic has showed that problem. So these are aspects, not only instrumental aspects like the confinement, but all what the confinement means, the the the, the teaching through online teaching, in which we can see the differences, the socioeconomic differences that has to do also with each one's home, with each one's conditions in their houses, the conditions that allowed each student to be able to go and find themselves in their house, and those issues showed the problems that they have with their parents and between them, and this showed the difficulties of some aspects of family relations that were not being taken into account before because we didn't look at it before. So today it has to do with what are the basic fundamentals regarding the mental health. So we have to strengthen the capacity to regulate our emotions and to share how to share risks, but mostly to develop resilience in front of adversities, like now that we have resilience is a magic word, and flexibility also is that we have to work with them. That's why the World Health Organization understands that psychological health, it is very important for those youngsters that don't have psychological, pathological problems very clear. And first of all, we have to look at look at them, listen to them, connect with them, and we have to start from the psychological help. It is not only it is for adults, for kids also, but we are adults who work with them, so we connect with them, and sometimes there is a lack of unity between the ages because it is something very difficult so that they listen to us.
This is why this proposal has the sense of providing with simple tools so young people can apply them to their daily lives, regardless of their family situation and their socioeconomic circumstances. That's why we have said that these are 12 ideas for the day after. The first one has to do with food. It seems silly, but people under confinement have uh, time to think. But what are they thinking about? They are thinking about eating, but maybe they're not eating well. And maybe they are going through the social media, being influenced by the good and healthy eating habits. And we have concluded that the food is the first medicine and the first remedy, because the feeding has an impact on mental health in terms of how we eat, if this food is correct or not. The first thing that we have to say to our kids is what they eat is the basis of the psychological well-being. If I eat in a balanced and correct way, not even considering the types of food, but how do I use the food as a way to cope with depression? Because the food satisfies me immediately, but I don't feel well right after I eat because the serotonin levels are high in the brain. And by the end of the day, it's a vicious circle in terms of how can we cope with anxiety, because it produces problems that we now have more evident problems. What we have to do is work along with them, teaching how to eat well. The second thing has to do with the body. The body is made for movement. During the confinement and through social media, over our cell phones, we had a big amount of people who were explaining how to exercise at home without the need of a gym. The physical exercise has to do with simple movement and exercises, and many people now are doing exercise more. This is an exercise that we applied during and at the beginning of the confinement, has to be kept because, as it is with food, physical exercise is in the basis of mental health. Everything that has to do with sedentarism and this rejection of exercise has to be talked with children and kids in order for them to observe simple things as just a stroll in the street in an adequate way during 45 minutes. It's one of the factors of prevention in the health. In order to prevent cardiac issues, we have to put the body in movement. The third has to do with attitudes, how my way of being, my personality, or my own tools determine my happiness. One of the most curious things for us psychologists is how many adults and many young people were saying that they don't have enough time to do what they love to do, that I want to go out, I want to play sports, I want to develop my social relations, but they always were pointing out the lack of time because they were not able to do these activities. But now that we have more time, this was not improved. People didn't improve those items. Basically, it brought more boredom and even discussions because now we have more time to spend together with our family and with ourselves. And this brings an opportunity. This did not necessarily bring an opportunity to do whatever I like. In a way, we realized that we were under deceiving or were deceiving ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves because at times happiness does not depend on how we use time in terms of quality regarding what we want to do and our expectations and self demands. How do we want to have a happy life, and our attitudes determine our happiness. Being fair with ourselves is the first step to reach that point. Vulnerability makes us stronger. Recognizing that we have problems, that we are feeling sad, that we feel anguish, we are nervous. In fact, we have to work with children, making them seeing that when we talk about it, when you vent or deal with it, and try to communicate your feelings, your negative feelings, deep down you're taking the first steps to solve a problem. And when we see the need to look for professional help, because by yourself or when you have an environment that cannot solve these problems of fears and preoccupation, we have to look for professional help. You have to accept yourself. And I have said this before, we have to set goals, we have to see our strengths, our lack of strengths, we have to work towards that. And I have a message, you have to accept yourself as you are. And alcohol levels during confinement have to be lowered because if you want to keep a healthy life, we have to reduce the alcohol consumption. Alcoholism make us take us to the wrong path. Also, for social relations, it has brought more openness with friends and colleagues. It is a sign of mental stability. We have to take ourselves among everyone. We have to be volunteers. We have to volunteer in regards of being good citizens and being local. This is thinking in a global way, but acting in a local way. We don't not only have to see what's outside, but what we have right under our noses. We have to change that perspective. Tell me what you do, and I will tell you how you're feeling. We have to grow as individuals in a global level that will makes us better persons. We have to be collaborative. Individualism doesn't improve our mental state. On the contrary, when we talk with others, we have to be always, or we are taking part in social situations that we have to consider, take into consideration the economic situation, also habits. This crisis have to makes us change our bad habits, and this makes us grow as individuals in a global way and not giving up in the face of adversity. When we have these adversities, we have to learn from our mistakes and put a bigger effort. We are in the second wave of the pandemic. We didn't learn enough from the first wave. What we did before that we were not able to solve our problems, what were our mistakes, where are our problems? We have to work towards that and reflect on our problems. Only in that way we have to change and also conquer and avoid this virus. And finally, we have been talking with all of our students. We have to observe them, listen to them, and count on them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Amable. It is fundamental what you mentioned and regarding the connection with our students. And I believe that connection, as well as the attitudes that we have to have towards them and the learning process, we are already in the second wave, and whereas us in South America, we are at the beginning or maybe at the end of the first wave. We have to learn from you in order to prevent that we are not hit as you have been impacted. So I will ask you to open your cameras for every panelist for this final part of the session. I would like to thank every one of you, Macarena, María, Dolores, Ana Alicia, Amable, Marcelo, and also the professor who had to leave, Jose Antonio from the Catholic University of Ávila. I think this has been very fruitful and interesting. In this cycle of 3 ICUSTA webinars, we had one about international integration processes. The second one was about literature and a way of instill values, and this one about mental health in the context of this pandemic. I believe the main the main message of this is to be in contact, and our main goal has to be open a channel of communication with you in order to share knowledge. The link of this will be sent because the different time zones is not easy to have everyone connected at the same time. So that's why we're going to send the links so the universities can share this webinar, because it has been very interesting. I would like to ask you the same and insist upon what I said at the beginning. The main goal is to share knowledge. If there's something that this pandemic has left, despite all the bad things, has been the international connection. We have been able to generate knowledge at this moment, and something that before was very difficult. It was expensive. We had to travel to do seminars. We had to have resources, but now we can share our knowledge with other colleagues in other latitudes. We can share with students. We can make our students to communicate with your students. I would like to invite you among the panelists that we had today. You can invite among yourselves or create projects together, if we can support those projects, that would be great. We are able to do that with the international relation directors from all the university. We can create short-time courses where 2 or more universities can participate, etc. I believe the chances are many. So what we need was to put in contact all these experts, and through this cycle of webinars is exactly that. And we expect in 2021 to continue doing it in different areas. Thank you very much again to everyone. I am going to send a participation certificate of ICUSTA, and those who were attending the seminar also will be receiving a participation certificate for this webinar. So I'm going to leave you the contact. I'm going to be contacting you via email, so I'll be sending all the information. And also, again, thank you very much for the participation. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.